Hello everyone, welcome to week 14. This week we'll focus on international relations, and today we'll cover five things. I hope so. I hope the time will be enough. So first of all, we'll define what international relations is, and as a field, what does it focus on, and then we'll look at some IR theories, unit of analysis in IR, and foreign policy, and finally we'll talk a little about international organizations. So starting with the definition, so what does the international relations do? So basically it's a subfield in political science, and it looks at the interactions between states. So however, in the last decades, this definition changed. So we are not necessarily looking at the relations between states, but it also encompasses all these different relations between different agencies, different polities, or different political entities. So basically, nation states are not only actors in IR anymore, and we have other actors such as international organizations, transnational networks, terrorist organizations. So basically, even multinational corporations, societies, citizens can also be agencies in IR. So we'll visit this in the unit of analysis section more closely. So what kind of subjects people research on in international relations? So one area might be globalization. So globalization can be defined as increasing interaction between peoples and societies across national borders. So growing interconnectedness of people. So it's kind of a system in which goods, money, and ideas can flow freely between countries. So in the general motto of globalization is make money, not war. But of course, globalization also produce winners and losers. And I think in the recent years, especially the growing power of the populist movements can be associated with the losers. So some politicians try to use the feeling, the feeling of losing among the citizens in different societies, so that they can come to power. That's actually quite an important phenomenon. So another one is, of course, IR also focus on war and peace, of course. So why states go to war? So there are micro and macro theories. So micro theories basically uses biology and psychology and seeks to explain war as a result of genetic human aggressiveness. But of course, these explanations are very limited because they are quite deterministic and they kind of deny human agency. So the macro theories are more popular among IR scholars. So one very obvious example is the theory of balance of power. So this is the oldest one, and it maintains that peace results when several states use national power and alliances to balance one another in the international system. So empirically, great periods of peace have been times when power international system was balanced. So some scholars actually go against this, and they argue the hierarchy of power is actually a better explanation, which means that they claim that calculations of power are tough, so it is hard to know when power is balanced in the system. So therefore, states are tempted to go to war when the power hierarchy is blurred. So I think the best example to that is when the Cold War ended in 1991. The authoritarian leader at that time of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, so he made kind of a bad decision because the power hierarchy is blurred because of the collapse of the Soviet Union at that time, and he attacked Kuwait. And he thought that no one is going to go against him, but of course that was a big miscalculation since the U.S. Intervened directly. It was the first Gulf War under the Bush administration at that time. And then another important theory that we can visit is misperception. It's quite psychological. It's kind of a wedding of micro and macro analysis. So psychological and real world bounce against each other in the minds of leaders. I think we can also use the same example of Saddam Hussein in this explanation as well. So in modern times, all countries see their actions as purely defensive, which is an issue of perception. So in that sense, sometimes leaders can actually make some misperceptions about their own power, so that they can get very defensive and sometimes offensive as well. So there are other issues that IR theories, IR scholars can look at. I don't have time to visit all of them, but dialogue and conflict between visions, beliefs, and ideologies, not necessarily only between states. The environment, space, the global economy, poverty, immigration, climate change, all of these things can be studied in international relations. So international relations theories are also very important. They can be empirical or normative. Empirical theories basically look at some empirical data. They collect data and they try to make systematic explanations of different phenomena in international relations. And therefore, actually, they make generalizations about and also predictions about the future. On the other hand, normative theories are more about what should be, what kind of world system we should have. So there is this very important should aspect in it. So both of these groups of theories are quite important, but I want to look at these theories from a different perspective, which is the unit of analysis perspective. So basically, what is the agency, what is the actor in any given theory can tell you about those explanations. So there are three general levels of analysis. So the system level, the state level, and the individual level. There is also group level. We'll definitely talk about that as well. So, but what we mean by individual level is we look at the actions of individuals responding to different things. I think we can use, and our reading uses the 2008 financial crisis. So how people actually develop attitudes towards their governments or austerity measures that their governments took at that time is a good example to that. So at the group level, you can look at what kind of different social movements, for example, came out of 2008 financial crisis. So how political parties picking up on the issue in their campaigns. So those are the things that can be seen as groups as unit of analysis. So state level, which is probably still one of the most common unit of analysis people use, scholars use. So can we treat states as individual actors? So can we really talk about national interests? So can states have certain preferences? So when you find yourself, for instance, having a sentence like Germany did this to, I don't know, like Greece. So are we really talking about, actors or individual agency there? Because we are talking about administrations or governments, not necessarily states itself. But I think it is quite important for us to question what the national interest is, because the national interest is determined by the range of factors and can change from one person to another, especially based on your ideology. So system level is the last one. So system level is basically looking at different phenomena from a global level, a bigger picture. So try to grasp wider ranging dynamics that emerge from global economic system in the example of the 2008 financial crisis. So how the level of analysis really determine our findings? So first of all, the particular perspective we assume determines the kind of information we gather. So this is very important. So if you choose individuals or the state or the system as your unit of analysis, it will definitely change how much and what kind of information you gather in terms of IR, in international relations. So for instance, the system level study would need to consider global linkages that go beyond single interactions between states. On the other hand, the state level study would require careful consideration of what kind of states we are looking at. So are we looking at developing countries or developed countries, how they respond to global crises, economic crises? So their geographical position, their historical ties and experiences, and their economic standing. All these factors are quite important when you look at the state level analysis. At the individual level analysis, I think it's more psychological. So what is going on in the minds of the leaders of the world? So these are quite important things to consider in terms of unit of analysis. So next, I will talk about foreign policy. So foreign policy is also a field within international relations. So it's a crucial area where we need to broaden our levels of analysis and kind of particularly important. So hopefully we can see this immediately due to the fact that any state activity that crosses their national borders, such as foreign policy, will have implications for other states. So this is why I think it's very important to study, for instance, American foreign policy, because those decisions made in the US administrations have very important consequences for other countries in the world. So foreign policy is primarily an elite game. So, and citizens do not necessarily pay close attention to foreign policy. As a result, there is a very small number of people actually responsible for making foreign policy decisions. This is why I think it's very important from the democracy perspective. I think we can easily claim that foreign policy as a policy area is probably one of the least democratic areas in domestic politics. So I think we'll also need to talk about international organizations. I only have 3.5 minutes left. So I think everything nowadays, especially in the last 3-4 decades, starts to go beyond international. This is very important. So thinking about world affairs in transnational rather than purely international terms is kind of a necessity now. The reason for that is the growing power of the international organizations. So the end of Cold War suggests that sovereignty may be slipping. So international organizations do seem to have influence over the domestic affairs of states. I think the classical example, and you'll remember this from the previous week, IMF, right? IMF routinely tells other states what to do. So international law no longer accepts sovereignty as cover of crimes against humanity. So these are some very important developments in international relations. And what kind of international organizations we are talking about? We are talking about non-governmental organizations, multinational corporations, or hybrid organizations, which are kind of mix of all different categories. Like it can be states and also at the same time some of these international organizations at the same time. So international governmental organizations are the organizations usually founded upon a treaty or multilateral agreement and consists of more than 2 states. So basically actors are still states in these organizations. I think UN is the most important example, which was founded after the Second World War. And it's an example of international governmental organization with almost universal membership. So as of 2017, there are 193 UN member states. So unfortunately, I don't have time to talk more about UN, but maybe we can visit this tomorrow during our synchronous meeting, especially talking about the power of the UN. So another example is actually the European Union. We can also talk about it tomorrow as well. If it's an IGO as well, International Governmental Organization, but will be a rare category of supranational. So the reason for that is an organization is actually able to govern its members and have a degree of independence from its member states. This is why I think the European Union is kind of unique and different from other IGOs. There are also international non-governmental organizations. So there are so many different examples like Greenpeace, Mercy Corps, Doctors Without Borders, Oxfam. All these are important examples. And we'll definitely talk more about this as well. Especially we can visit the Geneva Convention, which all UN members have ratified. And it's kind of an international law that governs humanitarian concerns arising out of war and conflict. So we'll definitely talk about those as well. And in terms of environment and issues about environment, international, these organizations are even more important because states have to find a way to cooperate. So we'll also talk about those as well tomorrow. I think I covered almost everything that I want to cover in this short recording, and I hope to see you all tomorrow in our meeting. Have a nice day. Take care.